Welcome back to the C Space Studio here at CES 2025. I am James Kotecki. We are sponsored by Integral Ad Science, and we are joined by Jason Mander, Chief Research Officer at GWI. Thanks so much for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We are really excited to chat with you about the data and the insights that you can bring into the conversation. And so what kind of data insights does GWI offer to clients? What's GWI all about?
Sure, so we are consumer insights at scale globally. Every year we speak to millions of respondents across more than 50 countries, asking them a wide range of questions about their digital lives and lifestyles. So everything from the social media, devices, apps they're using, through to the brands they're interacting with or purchasing, through to their attitudes, their behaviors, the things that shape their values and so ultimately drive their behaviors on a day-to-day basis.
And what's the methodology? Are you sending out polls digitally? Are you actually having one-on-one conversations in some cases? How does that work?
We're not having one-to-one conversations with millions of people. It's online surveys that are sent out across all of the countries.
I wonder, we don't have to get into this now, but I wonder if in the era of generative AI, you could eventually have one-on-one qualitative conversations with people.
I mean, there's interesting stuff happening with synthetic respondents. That's definitely a way to augment real-life human
So not the question
interviews.
asker, but the person answering the questions is a synthetic amalgamate.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. So I know that you are dealing with AI right now. You've launched something called Spark in the generative AI space. So tell us what that is and what it's about.
Sure, so all of our data is available on an on-demand platform. For a long time, to use a platform like that, you've had to be a research expert. You have to be comfortable in the world of crosstabs and building complex queries. Those are valuable skills and they always will be, but Spark is about democratizing access. It's about allowing any professional just to pick it up and start using consumer insights in their workflow. So you ask it a question, it queries the actual data. It's not a library of insights, it's the actual data to return the most relevant insights back to you.
Could I ask it a question like, what does Gen Alpha think about acoustic guitars? And it would return that information
You could ask it exactly that. It will bring back the best match, but also what it deems as relevant peripheral insights. So we hope it's going to be great for those moments that you want to be surprised or inspired by insights that aren't always so obvious.
Are there, you have so many insights in your bag of tricks that maybe it's hard to ask you just to pick out a few, but are there particular non-obvious insights that stand out to you from recent conversations with clients or things that have been discovered through your research that you think would be interesting to share?
Oh my goodness, so many of them. Just pinning it down to a couple would be a challenge, but there's so many. We've done some things recently on celebrations and which audiences choose to celebrate which events, and the results defy any logic, right? You've got same-sex parents, male, who are celebrating Mother's Day due to the history of their adopted birth child. You've got all sorts of unexpected insights that you'd never get without speaking to humans in all of their glorious diversity.
That's interesting because, of course, brands would want to show up in those special celebratory moments, but if they're just thinking about maybe the traditional moments or how they're trying to plot it out on the calendar traditionally, they might be missing some really obvious places to engage, or non-obvious places to engage.
Exactly, and that's why you need research at the sort of scale we're doing, millions of people to uncover all of those insights.
When you look at your data on the consumer side, especially dealing with things like AI, what are some things that people are not talking about that you think are really important?
Totally. So there's lots of obvious things you could say about AI. We all know how it's boosting productivity, efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. Two things stand out for me though. One is just how scared people are of AI. So if you take the US as an example, fear about AI is growing rapidly. It's been the fastest growing concern over the last 2 years. More people in the US are now scared about AI than they are about gun violence or domestic politics, which is quite a thing, right? And in all the countries that we've surveyed, if you ask people to pick one word to describe their feelings about AI, it's fear. So we are developing a love-fear relationship with this technology. The other thing is how wonderful it is to help people explore their identity. So Japan's a really good example. In Japan, only 1 in 5 people say they're comfortable talking about their mental health openly, but half say they'd be willing to use AI to talk in that context about their mental health. So it opens up lots of conversations that you might not be comfortable having with a human in real life, but you will have it in the sort of safe, anonymous space of an AI.
And there's just two examples there of the promise and the peril of AI. right?
Exactly.
So do you think maybe there's a potential branding issue here or messaging issue with the purveyors and the creators of this technology where the phrase AI specifically is what's driving the fear, but then if I say, would you like to talk to, maybe you don't say it's an AI bot about your mental health, it's just a friendly chat bot, and you kind of have the AI under the hood there, maybe that's where there's less fear?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say chatbot, that's got its own connotations.
Okay,
but
sure,
it's definitely about the
Yeah.
positioning. And look, consumers have been using AI for years without necessarily knowing it. It's just that generative AI has changed the game of what's possible.
Yeah, and the awareness, I think, of what's the exponential abilities and growth with this stuff.
Exactly.
Are there trends in audio content for 2025 that you'd like to share?
Sure, so for audio in our data, it's all about the rise of podcasts. This year, podcasts have overtaken radio globally in terms of popularity, especially among Gen Z. But also, even younger than that, we're surveying among Gen Alpha as well. It's already a fifth of 12 to 15-year-olds who are regularly using podcasts.
And who's the oldest Gen Alpha? You're the person to ask us. What's the actual definition of Gen Alpha?
It's very slippery, and it depends. We're saying 15 at the moment, but there'll be other schools of thought on
kids who grow up with iPads, is that kind of colloquially the way to say it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. But for Gen Alpha, they're as likely to be talking about their favorite podcasts as they are about their favorite music artists, which is a real shift from a few years back. It's also interesting how many people are using podcasts in moments that were traditionally dominated by other audio formats. So 2/3 of podcast listeners are using them during their commute. Half are using them just as background noise to, just have something on in the background.
Yeah.
That is what we used to use radio for. So you can see how podcasts have got a growth curve that's just going to keep on rising.
What about books and audio content like that? Is that still is that a growth area? Is that significant?
It's a growth area, but it's not a fast growth. About 1 in 10 globally are reading audiobooks. So good, solid, strong audience, but not much movement there.
So based on the language you used, I can still claim that I've read a book if I've listened to the audio version. Will you give me the credit for that?
If you want to claim that, you go for it.
I'm doing the best I can. There is, different trends that we talk about here in the C Space Studio that I'm privileged to kind of see rise and fall over the years. Blockchain, Web3, in previous years, I think maybe more people have wanted to talk to me about that here in the C Space Studio. Where do you think we are in that hype cycle?
It's really interesting. So our data is great for determining what consumers actually care about versus what's industry hype. If you were to look at the numbers for blockchain at the moment, it's not an especially rosy picture. Over the last 2 years, interest has fallen by about 25%. Globally, 16% of consumers say they're interested or excited by it. That falls to single digits in the US, in the UK. Yes, it's got some very hardcore enthusiasts and some excellent applications. It's more interesting for younger and higher income demographics, and they'll always be interesting to advertisers. But at the moment, blockchain has found itself in the same group as NFTs, VR, AR, metaverse, things that did peak excitement but have just been blown out of the water by AI from the consumer's perspective.
I feel like you've got so much data that I can just keep throwing different trends and topics your way and just getting these great insights. So I'm just going to keep doing that for the remainder of the interview. The smart home. Tell me, do people care about that concept? Do they define that concept in that way? And what are they telling you?
So they do care about it. I don't think any consumer necessarily sits down and thinks about the smart home, but they are filling their home.
Unless it doesn't work, right?
They are filling their home with devices. In particular, we're seeing smart security really rise over the last couple of years. There's the obvious trend that drives that, right? It's peace of mind. So you've got your regular travelers, your parents, but actually we're also finding that people who are regularly out of the house for leisure activities are also driving it. So regular cinema goers, movie goers, out-of-home diners, regular joggers even, they're all purchasing smart security products as well. So it's been driven by a sort of lifestyle upgrade for that peace of mind whenever you're out of the house. And interestingly, income doesn't seem to be a barrier to entering that space.
Health and wellness is related to the smart home because obviously so much of our well-being is tied to kind of what's going on in our house and in our lives. So I know that health is really exploding in the tech space. I mean, you can see it here at CES with the variety of offers and products here that are on display. What are consumers telling you about health and maybe just how digital ties into that?
Yes, health and wellness, they're not new trends, right? For a long time, consumers have cared about them. They've often been aspirational rather than sort of in reach. What's really interesting at the moment is we're seeing how certain product categories are doing a great job of helping consumers make easy choices that lean towards being health conscious. So energy drinks would be a good example. Once the preserve of gamers, athletes, we're seeing big growth among groups like middle-aged professionals. 45 to 54-year-old professionals are the biggest growing group for energy drinks. Similarly, stay-at-home parents, other groups like that. One of the reasons is the growth of options like fat-free energy drinks or added protein energy drinks. It's those opportunities to make a smarter, healthier choice in quite an easy way, and that's where we're really seeing health trends drive, where it doesn't cost much and it's quite easy for the consumer.
I've thrown a lot of different trends at you, topics. You've given me all this great data and insights. Any last one that you'd want to pick and share that we didn't talk about that you think is interesting?
Wow, that's quite
open to anything. Yeah.
Do you know what? It would just be the one myth I always try and dispel. You will often hear that Gen Z have a short attention span. All of our data points in the exact opposite way. Gen Z have a very long attention span if they care about something. If there's something meaningful, they go down those rabbit holes and spend a lot of time. So if you're thinking short form content is the only way to a Gen Z's heart, it's not true. You just have to get them interested in something.
So they have a great attention span potentially, but a low tolerance for bad stuff or boring stuff or irrelevant things.
It's exactly that.
Well, thank you for keeping this conversation so relevant to so many topics. Jason Mander, GWI, we really appreciate you joining us here.
Pleasure, thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. This is CES 2025. I'm James Kotecki in the C Space Studio.